FIDO Alliance's Passkey Index shows that 93% of user accounts across its member companies are now eligible for passkeys. More than a quarter of sign-ins are now done with passkeys. Passwords aren't gone, but they're increasingly irrelevant. I'm Joel McConvey, and today's Biometric Update Podcast goes deep on the passkey revolution with FIDO Alliance CEO Andrew Shikiar. We're here to talk passkeys. We know passkey use is growing, and we're starting to learn a bit more about the numbers. So to begin, before we get to the specifics, can you give me kind of your overall assessment of where we are in the journey to a passwordless world right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joel. Look, it's been just over 3 years since passkeys were released. We announced passkeys, over 3 years ago. And when we announced passkeys, what we did was we gave a name and a program and made a slight implementation change to how people can support FIDO authentication. So namely, FIDO 2 and WebAuthn. And the change we made was allowing the private key and the FIDO key pair to be synchronized, securely across a credential manager cloud, which meant that all of a sudden your passkey could be readily available across all of your devices. And at the same time with that, we introduced the term passkey and a brand and a logo associated, and made this announcement in conjunction with the world's three largest platform providers, Microsoft, Apple, and Google. So it's quite a moment. And what it did is it really transformed the landscape from a place where people were implementing FIDO and doing so well, but in a kind of sporadic way, where if you went to one site to sign in as a consumer, it might say next time use Windows Low. The other one might say next time use your face, next time use your fingerprint, but it might say use WebAuthn, which meant nothing to anybody who's not a total identity weenie like us. And so all of a sudden we started creating the opportunity for consumers to have a positive and repeatable experience with passkeys, where once they enroll for a passwordless sign-in, they'd get what they'd expect, which is that I could go ahead and have the same passwordless experience on my other devices as well, without having to re-enroll that device. So it's a better user experience, a repeatable user experience, and what we've seen since then in those 3 years is very, I think, fantastic adoption. We estimate tens of billions of accounts have the option to enroll a passkey, and we think there's over 3 to 4 billion passkeys actually being leveraged to secure consumer accounts. So by any measure, getting from 0 to say 3 to 4 billion in 3 years is something that I think is absolutely fantastic. So that being said, we still do have work to do. We want to make sure that passkeys, I think passkeys are on an inevitable path to becoming kind of the default way of signing into websites and applications. But we still want to make sure that we continue to improve the user experience. We identify some different edge cases, that we continue to drive confidence and higher assurance deployments, which we're seeing as more and more banks roll out passkeys. So work remains, but I feel really good about our overall trajectory in driving passkey adoption in the marketplace.
Those are pretty amazing numbers considering the amount of time you've had. It's like you said, it's only 3 years. So over that time, we've really kind of been able to obviously track usage more and document it. And so, just last week, I spoke with Rue Islam from Dashlane about their Passkey Power 20.
Yeah.
And Liminal, of course, has released the Passkey Adoption Study, and FIDO, the Passkey Index. So for those who haven't heard and don't know, can you explain what the Passkey Index is?
Yeah. So these are all great, data points, and it's really cool, by the way, to see industry measuring success alongside our own efforts to do so. The Passkey Index is a little bit different. This is really meant to be a benchmark on kind of qualitative performance of passkey implementations. So oftentimes I'll talk to a service provider who's implementing passkeys. Maybe they've been out for a couple months, or they have a pilot, and they'll say, "Look, we have a sign-in success rate of X percent, and we're seeing a reduction in sign-in time of Y seconds. Is this good?" It's a fair question, right? So it's kind of like a stick in space if you have nothing to measure against. So our goal here with Passkey Index is actually to take FIDO members who are some of the kind of leading and earliest adopters of Passkeys, and start aggregating their composite data to create benchmarks across key KPIs that a consumer service provider will look to for their own implementation. So this is a new initiative. It started with several members inside of FIDO Alliance. I think we have 9 different companies who took part in this to help us form the Passkeys Index. And so what we have here is certain data around sign-in success rate, decreased time to sign-in, some ancillary data, some data points around help desk incident reduction and things like that we're starting to aggregate and share with the industry. Now, there's a broader set of data that we'll share internally with members, but as this program evolves and grows over time, I see both things happening. Right, we'll continue to build a rich data set that the service provider members inside of FIDO Alliance can learn from, while also expose some repeatable benchmarks out to industry, so everyone sees progress and has latest and greatest data of their own to shoot for as they have their own implementations. But the headline here is that the general KPIs that consumer service provider looks at are all doing quite well, right? So I think our data, the sign-in success rate was 93%. The decreased time to sign in for using Passkeys over other forms of MFA was 73% decrease in sign-in time. So if you're in the business of getting people online to your site successfully and quickly, which most people are, Passkeys are clearly pointing the way. And what I'd say beyond that, so this is why we're introducing the Passkeys Index, but to me, some of the kind of qualitative anecdotes that you'll get from companies that have deployed Passkeys really speak to the value that they're seeing, right? So PayPal will tell you that for every basis point increase in Passkey adoption, they're seeing a corresponding basis point increase in revenues and decrease in fraud. In the Passkeys Index, we saw that participants were reporting up to an 81% reduction in help desk incidents related to sign-ins. Right, so that's real money being saved. That's real time being saved, all from Passkeys. Another data point I just leave people with is there's some huge brands deploying Passkeys and doing so successfully and doubling down on it. Right, so Amazon, PayPal, Google, Apple, Walmart, eBay, you name it. These companies are not just dipping their toes in the water; they're fully diving in as they're seeing initial success, and are expanding their rollouts to take on either adjacencies or added markets or added users as they're learning from their initial implementations, expanding to find even greater successes across their markets.
I was going to ask about those big names and how important or even necessary it is to have companies like Amazon and Google and Microsoft on board as proof of concept, if you will, to everyone else, and as a sort of driving force behind the movement.
I think it helps immensely, right? So if I'm an e-commerce provider, and by the way, I'd note that pretty much every major e-commerce provider in the U.S. Supports Passkeys, and in addition, payment services like PayPal and Shopify do. I use a Shopify Passkey all the time to make random purchases, using a cross-device sign-in flow because I like it. It's easy and it allows me to sign in and then make payments with a third-party payment provider. So, but having these big brands demonstrate that they're betting on this, I think gives greater confidence to other companies to do the same thing. Makes it a lot easier to build your business case internally. As opposed to taking a total flyer on something, you can point to the fact that these massive data-driven companies are all making the same bets and are clearly doing quite well with it. So I think it really helps give confidence and comfort, accelerate market adoption for companies of all sizes.
I want to talk about user experience for a minute. You've got liminal studies saying adoption readiness is high. And organizations are definitely, like you said, jumping, they're doubling down, they're all in on this. What about individual users? I mean, myself, I recently was asked to create a passkey when I was signing into Ticketmaster. But the first thing it did when I said yes was ask for my password, which I then went and reset and was logged in. So at that point, the moment was passed. So what kind of work continues to be done on, figuring out how to position this for the individual user as something that is eventually going to make their life much easier?
Yeah, I think one thing that we've all realized inside of FIDO Alliance is that it's in everyone's interest for every user's passkey experience to be as good as possible. And so we've invested collectively in developing data-driven UX guidelines and design guidelines. And these are expert guidelines available on our website, Passkeys Central, that give service providers best practices on how to introduce passkeys to their consumers, from how to prompt them to how to enroll them, how to manage them, how to give assurances of security and things like that, and just to have the optimal passkey rollout. So this is based on again our extensive research we've done over several years, also based on feedback that we're getting from these kind of trailblazing our relying parties inside of FIDO Alliance. All that feeds into these guidelines. What we'll see oftentimes are companies who do implementations. Sometimes if they don't follow those guidelines, or they have other kind of drivers, they may have some hiccups on their first rollout. So we encourage everyone to look at those guidelines to make sure that when they introduce passkeys, that they're doing so with their best foot forward. Not everyone does, but we encourage everyone to do so, and generally everyone finds their way, right? And so in fact, when we first introduced the guidelines, not everyone, I think they're pretty widely known now, but probably not as widely as I'd like them to be. But we had countless conversations with companies, especially on the earlier adopter side, who were adopting at the same time as we were developing the guidelines. Once they saw them, we're like, oh yeah, we came to the same conclusion over time. This would have saved us, months of development time and hundreds of thousands of dollars had we just seen these guidelines and followed these guidelines. So they're out there, and they're out there to save people time and money, make sure that they have a better implementation when they do implement passkeys.
Do you think people underestimate the economic argument for passkeys? I mean, I've heard this time and again that they save money. Is that something you think people really have internalized and understood about this technology?
I don't know. It's interesting. The Limball study shows that people, it exceeded everyone's expectations, right? And I think they had expectations around, some of the same KPIs that we talked about. I think ultimately, people are deploying passkeys for better user experience and better security. And I think it's interesting. It really turns kind of the sign-in dialogue from a security requirement to a business opportunity. So if you can reduce shopping cart abandonment, are you saving money there? Or are you creating new revenues? A little bit of both, right? If you can stop account takeovers, that's going to save you fraud money. So there's very clear, that reduced help desk incidents, and those are cost savings. So I think that people, as they're doing their business analyses, and again, we have some of this data on Passkeys Central, help companies build their business cases, they absolutely should be thinking about both the bottom line and top line opportunities associated with passkeys, because it does provide both. There's cost savings and revenue growth opportunity. I know this sounds too good to be true, but both really can be true. Better sign-in does both these things, and not to mention, create kind of a better customer experience.
And that kind of dovetails with the things you said about a younger generation driving adoption of this technology and being a force that is pushing this forward. Is that something you can speak about a bit? Is where young people fit into this equation?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have that data in front of me. We've done some generational kind of breakdowns before with kind of high-level consumer panels on who's more likely to adopt. But yeah, I think this pertains to younger people and older people alike. I think our seniors are some of the most at-risk population. They're constantly targeted by hackers and attackers because they're more vulnerable, frankly. And so I think it's important that everyone understands that the values here. We've done some work with AARP in the past to try to educate seniors on why and how to use passkeys. But yeah, I think people who are comfortable using on device or mobile devices are going to be comfortable using passkeys. That being said, pretty much everyone has a mobile device, and most people have a smartphone. The beauty of passkeys is that the same action you take to unlock your smartphone dozens, or in my daughter's cases, hundreds of times per day, is the same action you take to sign into a passkey or to use a passkey. So the user experience is pretty simple, and I think we should be seeing good adoption across demographics.
Yeah, you referred earlier to the passkeys as being inevitable now. So do you think you're past the point of the newness of the technology where there's a question about, okay, is this going to achieve saturation? Do you think we're now at the point where passkeys are on that inevitable journey to mainstream kind of omnipresence?
Yeah, I do think so, right? I think there's an inevitability about passkeys that I've been saying for a couple of years now that I think is absolutely true. Now, I think once we get to the next couple billion in play, that we'll hit that point where there's no turning back. But I do think that we'll look back on the password as we look at the wired phone and things like that. It's just going to be like driving a car with no seatbelts. Why would I possibly do that? Now, there's a difference between broad passkey adoption and the elimination of passwords. They're related, but both can be true, right? And both will persist for some time. And so I've been focused more and more on less passwords than passwordless, but they actually support each other, right? So as we rely more and more on passkeys, using passwords can become more of an anomalous type activity for service provider to flag, right? So maybe I still support passwords because I have a very diverse user base, and I don't want to alienate them, or people want to maybe they don't their device for some reason, a modern device, and I need to maintain passwords for whatever reason, but that password use in and of itself can start being a flag. Or if you see someone, Joel always types in the passkeys, now he's using a password. Well, that's certainly a flag, right? So I think just going from passwords being the default to being an outlier is a success in and of itself, which will really accelerate the full demise of passwords from our daily lives.
Yeah, when the stories sort of frame it as like the death of passwords, I have imagined it before being a kind of shootout at the OK Corral, but it's really more of an aging out kind of thing. Where that technology will come to seem.
I think that's a much. Yeah, it's really the eventual demise, and it's the death of reliance on passwords that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. Like I need a password to do this. Like, no, that's where you're going to be at a high risk for usability scenario, because some companies will maintain them. We want to put tools in place to help people get to a truly password independent place. And we're focused on doing that. We're seeing some service providers eliminate passwords altogether today. And my hope is that each year we'll see more and more do that to where it becomes more commonplace and more of an expected activity for consumers to see.
Let me get your take on a looming threat, which is the quantum event that people sort of discuss when they talk about cryptography and what this could mean for the systems we use now. How is FIDO approaching this particular issue?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have been tracking, the kind of post-quantum threat, if you will, for some time now. We have a study group. I'm not to bore you with standards mechanics.
No, we love standards and mechanics here. we have
a study group within our board technical committee that's tracking this and making recommendations on it. We wrote a paper and issued a paper on this, I think earlier this year, on ways to contemplate this. So generally, we're tracking the space. We think we'll be prepared to implement post-quantum algorithms as soon as they're available. When that time comes, that will be well positioned to address the post-quantum world.
Mm-hmm. So let's say 5, 6, 10 years from now, even in your estimation, is the FIDO Alliance something that will sort of age out of itself in that there won't be a need to support passkey adoption because it'll become this sort of like universally accepted standard?
Look, I think one thing FIDO Alliance has done, so we've been around for 12, 13 years now. And I feel really great about the work that we've done as an organization, right? So our mission from the get-go was to reduce the world's over-reliance on passwords. And we've done that with multiple sets of protocols, with a very robust certification program that certifies products for meeting those protocols. And market enablement programs that are manifested in things like the Passkey Index and other kind of best practice documentation. But we are looking at the broader digital identity lifecycle, right? So, passkeys, sign-in has been the primary attack vector for attackers because it's so weak. We've known this for decades. right? And so we've been literally known for multiple decades, and for the past, I'd say 2 decades, the answer has been, okay, well, geez, passwords are really crappy, so let's add layers on top of that. All right, so that's why every regulation on the book or guidance is like use 2FA, SMS OTP. Make sure you have layers. And to be clear, any form of second factor authentication is better than a password alone. But what Passkeys have done is actually, present a true passwordless replacement instead of the password, which is truly unphishable, and then stops remote attacks, whether you're doing an MFA bypass or not. Passkeys can close, that front door entirely. Now, there's really 3 key steps to the digital identity lifecycle. It starts with account creation, and then there's account sign-in and account recovery. And so we're stopping sign-in. But account creation is equally important, right? Especially as we're doing more and more remote onboarding, remote identity verification is a space that we're looking at very closely. So we have certification programs that certify products for how well they're doing remote verification, for face verification, document authenticity. For the face verification includes things like bias as well as your kind of typical biometric performance metrics. And so we see this as a really critical area that we're working to address as well. All right. So if you can have what I'll call possession-based means for account onboarding, rather than a possession-based means for signing with a passkey, when it comes time to recover your account, you have, again, 2 possession-based factors that you need to prove to recover that account. And that stops a lot of these remote attacks that are now moving from sign-in to recovery via social engineering to take over accounts. So we're very focused on these broader areas of digital identity beyond just passkeys to make sure that we have programs and best practices in place across the digital identity lifecycle. So bearing that in mind, as we look further afield, like what else is there in digital identity where, our stakeholders that we've brought together and have been collaborating quite well over the past dozen years, where else can we make a difference? Right? Where do they want to make a difference? And beyond, as we look at this whole identity lifecycle, whether you're signing the passkey or signing in with digital credential, we want to make sure that there's kind of standards-based ways of doing that. So I see a future growth area for us, future work area for us being in the broader digital credential space. Right. So how do I have a verified? How do I, what standards and certifications are in place for verified credentials? Right now, it's a very fragmented space. We're interested to see, how we can work with industry partners like OpenID Foundation, like ISO, like W3C to give digital credentials a passkey moment, if you will. Right. So what we did, when Passkeys basically transformed WebAuthn and CTAP into Passkeys today, what can we do collectively to help accelerate and unlock the digital credential space? Right. So whether you're signing with a passkey or a verified credential, you're doing so securely in a very smooth, intuitive way that helps really, drive commerce, security, and trust in this networked economy that we all live in. So very long answer to your very short question. I think we have work to do over the next, 10, 12 years. When passkeys will become kind of a de facto kind of sedimented way of doing things, kind of like HTTPS or SSL. There's other work to be done in digital credentials, and that as long as our stakeholders want to work together in this body that we've created, we'll do work together. And if the day comes where stakeholders say, "Hey, look, job well done," and then that we'll cross that bridge at that point and feel good about the work that we've done together.
Awesome. Well, we're getting low on time, but I did just to jump off the verifiable credentials thing for a minute. Let me get your take on the UDI wallet rollout, and what role is that going to play in sort of amplifying digital identity as a real thing for people across the world?
It's a huge thing, and we're working very closely with the team there and with the European Digital Identity Wallet team in Europe and the European Commission. It's real interesting because I think that's those of us who've been in the identity space for a while will tell you that we've been talking about these concepts literally for decades, since the early 2000s. And what's interesting is a lot of them are now coming to the fore, right? To decentralized identity, distributed identity, managed identity. So, all these different concepts are kind of finally, I think, in position to be materializing and commercialized. And I think what's happening in Europe is a very big catalyst in the sense that the IDAS 2.0 is requiring European member states to issue wallets to their citizens by the end of 2026. And so we're actively engaged here. So I think one challenge that these member states are seeing is it is a fragmented landscape of different protocols and standards. There is not a certification program in place right now to help them understand both the wallet providers and the consumers of these wallets and the holders and issuers to understand, how's this all coming together? Can I trust it? Is it interoperable? So I think there's a lot of pieces that need to come together pretty quickly to help that be successful. So that's one area that we're interested in leading into to see how we can add value to those rollouts in Europe, while also realizing that Europe's far from alone in issuing mobile identity capabilities to citizens. Right, so it's happening at massive scale in India and Japan, the MDLs in the U.S. Very fragmented, but also there's MDLs coming out right now. No one knows what to do with them, but they're happening. So I think it's a very interesting time to be kind of tracking and trying to engage and help add value in this space, and that's what we're aiming to do.
It's a wild time in identity. So much happening, so many transformational things going on, and so much opportunity for it to become something completely different within years. It's fascinating to watch. So thank you very much for your insights on it today, Andrew. I really appreciate you joining us again, and I look forward to speaking again in the future and seeing what will be happening with the FIDO Alliance then.
Good stuff, Joel. Thanks so much. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Take care, Andrew.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thanks again to Andrew Shikiar for taking the time to join us. And thanks to you for listening. For FIDO's Passkey resources, check out passkeyscentral.org. And for all the latest on biometrics and digital identity, be sure to check out www.biometricupdate.com.